"Death will not take me today," Anya screamed, the frozen air tearing at her throat as the ice floor beneath her feet cracked like glass under the colossal weight of the Yakutian buffalo. Her eyes, blurred by the animal's breath, saw the 5-ton beast charge, its horns sharp as ancient spears. The entire village depended on her, a hunter widow, to bring down the creature that promised both salvation and damnation. And what she did next would decide everyone's fate. Anya did not hesitate. The buffalo's roar echoed in her chest, but the image of her village's hungry faces was louder than any fear. It was a risky plan, born of days of observation and the wisdom Ivan, her beloved, had taught her about the tundra and its hidden dangers. She knew that brute force would not be enough against a creature of such magnitude. Her only chance was cunning, patience, and the vulnerability of the environment itself. With a sharp cry, more of defiance than panic, Anya rolled to the side, feeling the icy wind of the buffalo's charge brush her parka. The ground trembled where the beast's horns had struck, leaving a deep mark in the ice. The animal, a colossus of primal fury, turned with deceptive slowness, its small red eyes fixed on her. Every muscle of its colossal body seemed to pulsate with wild energy, and the smoke exhaling from its nostrils was a constant reminder of the warmth and life it possessed, in contrast to the deadly cold Anya felt in her bones. "Come, beast," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible in the howling wind. She began to retreat, not in panic, but with calculated precision. Her steps were light and quick, gliding over the slippery ice surface, while the buffalo, with its imposing mass, followed her, each stride a dull thunder that made the ground vibrate. Anya lured it to the most treacherous part of the frozen lake, an area she had mapped in her mind, where underwater currents made the ice thinner and more fragile. Anya's heart beat like a shaman's drum. She could feel the strain in her muscles, the cold cutting her cheeks, but the image of Ivan, smiling and proud, spurred her on. He had always believed in her, even when the village saw her only as a frail widow. Now, she needed to prove that a hunter's strength lay not just in muscles, but in mind and spirit. The ice began to groan. A low, sinister sound, like a lament of the earth itself, rose from the frozen depths. The buffalo, perhaps sensing the change, paused for an instant, its gaze confused. But Anya gave it no time to think. She turned, running faster, the perfect bait for the hungry beast. The animal snorted, a sound that seemed to tear the air, and resumed the chase, its overwhelming mass advancing over the increasingly precarious surface. Fine cracks, like silvery spiderwebs, began to spread under the buffalo's weight. Anya danced with death, dodging horns that passed inches from her body, feeling the warmth of the animal's breath on her face. She could see the desperation in the beast's eyes, confusion mixed with fury. The ice cracked, a sound that was now louder, more urgent, a warning to both of them. Anya knew she was at her limit. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but she could not stop. The plan was risky, and the margin of error non-existent. She needed the buffalo to advance a few more meters, to the exact point where the ice would be unable to bear its weight. Each step was a silent prayer, a promise to Ivan, to the elders, to the children who waited. Oymyakon's life hung by a thread as thin as the ice beneath her feet. She felt a different, deeper vibration coming from the ground. It wasn't the superficial cracks, but a tremor from below, an imminent rupture. The moment was near. Anya felt the deep tremor within her. It was the final warning, the point of no return. The ice beneath the buffalo, already a web of cracks, gave way with a deafening crack across the tundra. A wide, dark fissure opened, swallowing the colossus's front legs in an explosion of water and ice. The animal bellowed, a sound of panic and fury as it desperately tried to gain purchase, its enormous hind legs slipping on the treacherous surface. Anya did not wait. It was the crucial moment. With surprising agility, She leapt back onto the thicker ice. The buffalo, unbalanced, struggled against gravity and the icy cold. Its red eyes widened, and it let out a desperate snort, its breath steaming in the air. It was a sight of power and despair, a majestic creature fighting for its life. With the buffalo partially submerged, its fury turned to struggle. It tried to rise, its horns scraping the remaining ice, but the 5-ton weight was too much. Anya, despite the pain and exhaustion, knew she couldn't hesitate. This was the final blow Ivan had taught her: intelligence and precision. She ran to the edge of the ice, using the animal's panic to her advantage. She screamed, her voice hoarse and determined, drawing the buffalo's gaze. The beast, in its confusion, made one last, colossal effort to reach her, pushing itself with its hind legs. This movement, predictable in its fury, was what Anya had been waiting for. The concentrated weight, combined with the instability of the compromised ice, was enough. With a final groan that seemed to tear the air, the remaining ice beneath it shattered, and the giant plunged into the dark, icy waters, disappearing with a crash. A heavy silence descended upon the tundra, broken only by the howl of the wind and Anya's ragged breath. She fell to her knees in the snow, her body trembling from cold, adrenaline, and overwhelming relief. A sharp pain radiated from her shoulder, where the tip of a horn had grazed her, but she barely felt it. Her eyes filled with tears that froze on her eyelids, tears of exhaustion, victory, and sadness for the life that was gone, but gratitude for the life saved. The image of Ivan appeared in her mind, not as a painful memory, but as an encouraging smile, a nod of approval. He would be proud. The village would be safe. Oymyakon, which seemed condemned to hunger, would have food. Hope, which had faded with Ivan's death, now flickered again, fragile but real. In the depths of that frozen lake, Anya took a deep breath, feeling the icy air burn her lungs. The task was not yet finished. The buffalo was in the water, but it needed to be pulled out, and she was alone. The tundra seemed larger, the silence deeper, but the determination in her heart was unbreakable. She slowly rose, each movement an agony, but the sight of the village, the children, the elders spurred her on. She was Anya, Ivan's widow, and the hunter who had saved her people. The journey back, dragging the colossus, would be arduous, but she would not give up. Not now, not after this. The sunlight, weak and distant, began to peek over the horizon, promising a new day of hope for Oymyakon. Anya, knees sinking into the snow and body trembling, raised her head. The pale Yakutian sun barely warmed the air, but its light brought clarity to the task. The buffalo, a dark colossus, lay partially submerged in the icy waters. Pulling it out, alone and injured, seemed impossible. The pain in her shoulder was constant, but determination burned brightly. Ivan always said that the tundra taught patience and inventiveness. There was no brute force to move 5 tons. She would need a plan, an ancestral strategy. Her eyes scanned the landscape, searching for strong branches, stones, anything to leverage. With slow movements, Anya began. Using her ice pick, forged by Ivan, she tested the thickness around the hole, tapping and digging. Each blow was an effort, each breath a dense cloud. The throbbing in her shoulder was ignored, focusing on the task. The hungry faces of the village children were her fuel. Hours dragged on, marked by the slow ascent of the sun. Anya safely widened the hole, creating a gentle ice ramp. Then came the most arduous part, securing the ropes. She untied Ivan's long, sturdy leather ropes and with an improvised hook, cast them over the buffalo's body. The maneuver required several attempts, her numb fingers barely feeling the touch. Finally, the ropes were secure. Now the challenge was to pull. Anya knew she couldn't drag the buffalo alone. She would need the environment's help. She began to dig small holes in the thicker ice, driving in robust stakes she had found and carved. She created a rudimentary pulley system, using leverage and the ice's resistance to multiply her own strength. It was an exhausting job, demanding every ounce of energy. She pulled the ropes, her muscles screaming, sweat running under her parka, freezing. The buffalo moved millimeter by millimeter, a reluctant giant emerging from the depths. With each small advance, a sigh of relief and renewed determination. She remembered Ivan, teaching her to tie knots, to use her body weight, never to give up on a hunt. He was with her in every fiber, in every pull. The sun was already at its highest point, beginning its slow descent, when the buffalo's head finally emerged from the water, followed by its massive shoulders. Anya stopped, gasping, her hands raw, but a faint smile curved her cracked lips. It wasn't the end, but a significant victory. The colossus was on firm ice, though the task of transporting it to the village was immense. She allowed herself a moment of rest, sitting in the snow, body exhausted, spirit unshakable. YAKUT was one step closer to salvation. Hunger averted, hope rekindled. The memory of Ivan, once an open wound, was now strength, an unbreakable bond connecting her to her purpose. She looked at the buffalo, a trophy of resilience, and at the distant horizon where the village awaited her, unaware of the sacrifice and victory Anya had achieved. The journey back, with the buffalo, would be long and strenuous, but she was ready. YAKUT deserved it. In the village, Elder Boris, his wrinkles deep as valleys in the snow, watched the sky. His eyes, clouded by age and worry, searched for a sign. Anya has been gone too long, he murmured to himself, his heart heavy. The children, pale and thin, played weakly near the fires, their laughter muffled by the cold and hunger. Hope was a luxury few could afford, but deep down, a small flame stubbornly persisted, the flame of faith in Anya, Ivan's widow, who had set out to face the impossible. Boris closed his eyes, feeling the icy wind on his face, and whispered a silent prayer. Anya, oblivious to the village's apprehension, began to move the buffalo. With each meter dragged, each rope adjusted, she felt the connection to her people, to Ivan, to the tundra itself. The cold was a constant enemy, but the promise of life for YAKUT was a warmth that propelled her. Night approached, bringing with it a cloak of darkness and even crueler temperatures, but Anya would not stop. She was the bridge between misfortune and salvation, and her spirit would not yield. The journey would be a testament to her unbreakable soul. Anya felt the colossus's weight with every step, her muscles aching from battle and exhaustion. The Yakutian night descended, a veil of darkness that seemed to suck all remaining warmth from the world. The stars, bright and distant, offered no solace against the cold that intensified with each minute. Perhaps 60 degrees. Her breath formed dense clouds, dissipating into the biting air. She had improvised a rudimentary sled from frozen branches, tying the buffalo with Ivan's ropes. It was not a task for one person, but Anya had no choice. She pulled, pushed, leveraged, using Ivan's wisdom about the physics of ice and snow. Each meter was a hard-won victory, a test of her will. The pain in her shoulder, once an annoyance, now throbbed with a dull intensity. But she ignored it, focusing on the monotonous rhythm. The sound of the sled scraping on the ice was her only companion in the silent vastness of the tundra. In the village, the central bonfire flickered weakly, battling the oppressive darkness. Boris, the elder, sat near it, his eyes fixed on the entrance, as if he could conjure Anya's image. The children had been put to bed, their stomachs rumbling. But their parents tried to soothe them with stories of abundant hunts, though the reality was cruelly different. Lyudmila, Boris's wife, with calloused hands and a gentle gaze, placed a cup of warm herbal tea in his hands. "She will return, Boris," Lyudmila said, her voice a soft melody but with uncertainty. Boris merely clutched the cup, the warmth comforting his hands but not his heart. Time dragged on, and the anxiety in the village grew like a silent blizzard. Women gathered in groups, whispering prayers and sharing memories of Ivan. They remembered Anya's determination, but also her fragility as a widow. Who could face such a challenge alone? Doubt was a slow poison, corroding the hope Anya had ignited. Far away, Anya felt the cold penetrate her boots, her toes losing sensation. She stopped for a moment, gasping, and stamped her feet on the ground to restore circulation. With each stop, the temptation to surrender, to lie down in the snow and let the cold take her, was almost overwhelming. But the image of the children's hungry eyes, Boris's worried face, the promise to Ivan, all of it spurred her on. She could not fail. She looked at the buffalo, now a dark, imposing silhouette against the pale snow under the moonlight. It was a heavy burden, but also a symbol of life, of food, of the future. With a sigh that turned to vapor, Anya adjusted the ropes and began to pull again. Her movements were slower, more deliberate, but with each step she felt she was closer to home. The village was a beacon in her mind. Boris, in the village, felt a shiver that was not just from the cold. He stood up, walking to the fire, his eyes sweeping the darkness. "There's something in the air," he murmured to Lyudmila. "A change." Hope, once a whisper, now seemed like a distant drum, beating in his chest. He felt that Oymyakon's destiny was about to be revealed. Anya, amidst the icy vastness, stumbled. A stone hidden under the snow made her foot turn. She fell heavily, her injured shoulder hitting the frozen ground with excruciating pain. A cry escaped her lips, swallowed by the wind. Tears of pain and frustration streamed down her face, freezing instantly. Exhausted, injured, the village seemed infinitely distant, but as she tried to get up, her eyes focused on the buffalo, and a new, deep determination swept over her. She could not give up. The entire village depended on her. As Anya rose, she felt every fiber of her body protest. Her shoulder throbbed with acute pain, a cruel reminder of her vulnerability. The fall had been a physical and moral blow, testing her resilience. The icy wind seemed to mock her, and the darkness of the Yakutian night swallowed the faint moonlight. For an instant, Ivan's image seemed distant. What if she failed? The hunger in the village, the promised hope, everything would vanish. But Ivan's words echoed, "True strength is not in never falling, but in rising again." With a groan of determination, she managed to stand, the pain a burden, not a reason to stop. In the village, Boris's worry turned into unsettling certainty. He couldn't sleep. "She's out there, Lyudmila," he said, donning his parka. His eyes, which had seen countless winters, held urgency. "I feel it. Something is about to happen." Lyudmila, who knew her husband, did not dissuade him. "Go, my dear," she said, handing him a lantern and bread. "But take someone. The tundra does not forgive solitude." Boris nodded. He called Dmitri, a young hunter trained by Ivan, and some men exhausted by hunger. "We need to find Anya," Boris declared, his voice hoarse but firm. "She's out there alone with the buffalo. We need to help her bring it back." There was hesitation, the fear of the cold, the darkness. The tundra was palpable, but the mention of the buffalo, the promise of food, and Boris's determination ignited courage in their hearts. With flickering lanterns and pounding hearts, the small group set off. Boris led, his experienced eyes searching for any sign in the snow, any trace of Anya. With each step, the cold bit, but the hope of finding the huntress and the legendary buffalo spurred them on. They followed Anya's tracks, now more visible in the moonlight, and with each meter, anxiety mingled with growing anticipation. Anya, a few kilometers from the village, could barely take another step. The buffalo, even on the improvised sled, seemed an insurmountable weight. She was about to give in, exhaustion overwhelming her, when she heard it. A faint sound, distant but unmistakable. Voices. She stopped, her body tense, her heart leaping in her chest. Was it a mirage? A trick of the cold? No. The sound grew clearer. Closer. They were human voices. Suddenly lantern lights appeared in the darkness, like shooting stars. Boris, Dmitri, and the others emerged, figures blurred by steam. Anya couldn't speak. Warm tears streamed down her face. Boris ran to her, his eyes welling with relief and astonishment at the sight of the colossus in the snow. "Anya, you did it!" His voice was a whisper of admiration. Dmitri and the others gaped, looking at the 5-ton buffalo, a real legend. Relief washed over Anya, a warm wave that made her legs give way. She was no longer alone. The village had come for her. The turning point had arrived. The village, once plunged into the darkness of uncertainty, now had a beacon of hope. With the men's help, the buffalo would be brought home. Anya, exhausted, but her heart overflowing with gratitude, felt the deep connection of her people. The true hunt was not just about bringing down the beast, but about bringing hope back to Oymyakon. Anya felt Boris's arms support her, a firm embrace she hadn't realized how much she needed. The old elder, tears streaming down his wrinkles, squeezed her gently, a gesture of affection and respect that warmed her soul. Dmitri, the young hunter, approached, his eyes wide between Anya and the colossus of flesh and bone. It's real," he whispered, his voice choked with admiration. The other men, previously hesitant, now moved with new vigor, their faces illuminated by the lantern light and the promise of food. The sight of the buffalo, imposing even in death, was a miracle they could barely believe. Boris examined Anya with concern. "Your shoulder, daughter. You're hurt." He gently touched the swollen, bruised area. Anya merely shook her head, a faint smile on her lips. "It's nothing the warmth of the village won't cure, Boris, but the buffalo, we need to take it." Her priority was still the village, not her own pain. The men, invigorated by the discovery and Anya's presence, began to work with renewed energy. Anya's improvised sled system, once an almost insurmountable burden for a single woman, now became an efficient tool in the hands of several. Dmitri and another young hunter, Mikhail, took the front ropes, their young muscles taut with effort. Boris, with his wisdom, guided them, pointing out the firmest spots on the ice, the best levers. With each pull, the buffalo, previously an inert weight, seemed to respond to the collective will, moving more easily. Anya, though exhausted, felt a new strength. The solitude of the tundra had been broken by camaraderie, by shared purpose. She walked beside the buffalo, watching the men, her heart filled with deep gratitude. It wasn't just food they were dragging. It was the very life of the village, the hope of a new beginning. With each meter they advanced, the darkness of the night seemed less oppressive, the cold less biting. The lanterns swayed, casting dancing shadows on the snow, but the light that truly mattered was the one igniting in the eyes of each man. In the village, Lyudmila couldn't settle down. Sitting by the fire, she knitted a small blanket, but her eyes were fixed on the door. The children slept, their faces pale, but a more peaceful sleep, perhaps sensing the change in the air. "They're taking a long time, aren't they?" she asked her neighbor Eleanor, who also waited, an empty bowl in her lap. Eleanor merely nodded, a lump in her throat. Doubt still lingered, but faith in Boris and, even more so in Anya, was a resilient thread. Suddenly a distant sound broke the night's silence, a howl, not of a wolf, but of human voices. Lyudmila jumped up, her heart pounding. "They're coming! They're coming!" The cry echoed through the village, waking those who slept. Cabin doors opened, and residents, wrapped in furs, emerged into the cold night, their faces filled with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The lantern lights appeared in the darkness, larger, closer, and then the sight. Boris and the men, sweaty and breathless, but with wide smiles, pulling the sled, and on it, the unmistakable silhouette of the buffalo. A murmur of astonishment and joy swept through the crowd, and there, beside it, stood Anya, small but upright, her eyes shining with a light that was not just the reflection of the lanterns. Lyudmila ran to Boris, hugging him tightly. "You found him! You found her!" The children, now awake, pointed at the buffalo, their small faces illuminated. Hunger would be driven away. The entire village erupted in applause and shouts of joy. It was a celebration of life, courage, and unity. Anya, watching the scene, felt a deep warmth spread throughout her body, more potent than any bonfire. The sacrifice, the pain, the solitude. It was all worth it. Hope was no longer a fragile flicker. It was a burning flame, fueled by the resilience of her people. The village of Oymyakon, which had faced the cruelest winter, now saw the dawn of a new day, a day of abundance and gratitude, all thanks to the unbreakable courage of one woman. Joy exploded in the village of Oymyakon like a newly lit bonfire, spreading warmth through every heart. The murmur of astonishment and shouts of jubilation transformed into an orchestra of voices echoing through the cabins. The children, once pale and silent, now ran around the buffalo, their eyes wide with admiration and a glimmer of hope long unseen. Lyudmila, tears of relief streaming down her wrinkled face, hugged Anya tightly, feeling the fragility of her friend's body and the unshakable strength that propelled her. "You are a legend, Anya," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Boris, beside them, merely nodded, his tear-filled eyes fixed on the widow who had defied the impossible and triumphed. The admiration was palpable, a warm cloak enveloping everyone present. Anya, despite the exhaustion that made her sway and the acute pain in her shoulder, felt invigorated by the contagious energy of the village. The joy and relief of seeing her people safe made her forget her own injuries for an instant. She smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face, marked by cold and fatigue. "It wasn't just me," she said, her voice hoarse but firm, reaching everyone. "It was all of us. Ivan taught us never to give up, and you gave me the strength to continue." Her eyes swept over the faces of the men who had helped her, and in each of them she saw recognition and gratitude, a strengthened bond of unity. The task of processing a 5-ton buffalo was monumental, but hunger was a cruel master that taught efficiency and cooperation. Under the guidance of Boris, who quickly regained his posture as a wise leader, and with Anya's practical wisdom, the village organized itself with impressive synchronicity. The women, with their sharp knives and agile hands, began to work on the meat, while the men, including Dmitri and Mikhail, used axes to debone and cut the larger parts, transforming the colossus into manageable portions. The icy morning air, which began to lighten over the tundra, helped preserve the meat, turning the environment into a vast natural refrigerator. Anya, even injured, did not stand idle. She instructed on the best cuts, on how to utilize every piece, remembering Ivan's precious lessons. Her fingers, once numb with cold, now moved with renewed purpose, guiding less experienced hands. The fat would be used for candles and heating, the bones for tools and nutritious broth, the hide for warm clothing and more resistant shelters. Nothing would be wasted. Every part of the buffalo would honor its sacrifice. With each cut, each piece of meat separated and stored, Ivan's image emerged, no longer an open wound, but a strong and inspiring presence, a legacy of life. The smell of fresh meat and blood, once a sign of danger and struggle, was now the scent of salvation and abundance. The bonfires were rekindled with more vigor, and small pieces of meat were roasted and distributed. The children, eating voraciously, laughed and played, energy returning to their small bodies with each bite. Their parents watched them with tear-filled eyes, gratitude filling their hearts. Lyudmila prepared an herbal salve for Anya's shoulder, while Boris, sitting beside her, held her hand, a silent gesture of affection and paternal pride. The village, once on the brink of the abyss of hunger, now teemed with life and renewed purpose. Human connection, strengthened by adversity and altruism, was visible in every gesture, in every shared glance. Anya, feeling the warmth of Boris's hands and Lyudmila's care, understood that her journey had not just been to hunt a buffalo, but to rekindle the flame of community, to prove that even in the most adverse and desolate conditions, hope and resilience always find a way to flourish. Winter was still long, but Oymyakon had found its inner strength, and with it the promise of a brighter and safer future. The days that followed were filled with hard work and silent gratitude. The buffalo meat, carefully cut and stored in holes dug into the permafrost, ensured that hunger would no longer be an immediate shadow over Oymyakon. The hides were stretched and treated, promising new clothes and blankets that would bring more warmth and comfort. The bones, cleaned and dried, would be transformed into tools and ornaments, a constant reminder of Anya's victory. The village, once quiet and somber, now resonated with the murmur of voices, the laughter of children, and the constant sound of work. Hope, once a luxury, had become daily bread, feeding the soul of every resident. Anya, under Lyudmila's care, slowly recovered. Her sore shoulder still bothered her, but the herbal salve and the warmth of Boris and Lyudmila's cabin, where she was welcomed, worked wonders. Lyudmila, with her ancestral wisdom, prepared nutritious broths and warm teas, while Boris shared stories of past winters, reminding everyone that resilience was their people's greatest heritage. Anya listened, her eyes fixed on the fire, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the lightness of relief. Ivan's image now was a beacon, not a burden. He would be proud. Dmitri and Mikhail, the young hunters, began to seek Anya out frequently, looking for her guidance. They saw in her not just Ivan's widow, but a teacher, a heroine. Anya, in turn, felt a new purpose. She couldn't hunt for now, but she could teach, share the wisdom Ivan had passed on to her and which she had proven in the tundra. Nights were filled with lessons on tracking, on reading the wind and snow, on the patience and cunning needed to survive. The village had found not only food, but a new leader, a source of inspiration that united everyone. Human connection deepened each day, weaving a network of support and solidarity that the cruelest winter could not break. Oymyakon was being reborn, stronger and more united than ever. The days of renewed hope turned into weeks under the Yakutian winter. The joy of the hunt remained, a constant warmth in memories, but the cold outside did not relent, intensifying each day. Fires crackled, consuming wood at an alarming rate. Furs and broths brought comfort, but the persistent darkness and howling wind whispered doubts into fragile hearts. Anya, her shoulder almost healed, felt new concern. She observed the villagers. The children's laughter was sporadic. The men seemed slower under their furs. Winter, which they thought they had tamed, revealed itself to be multifaceted. A silent threat to their homes was one of them. The permafrost yielded in spots. Cabins creaked. Cracks appeared in the ice and earth walls. Moisture seeped in, threatening vital warmth. Boris noticed Anya's concern. "Winter does not forget us, daughter," he said, his voice grave, observing the ice near the cabin. "It always tests us." Lyudmila squeezed her hand, a silent gesture of support. Dmitri and Mikhail felt the change in the air. "Provisions are safe," Dmitri said, but his eyes revealed apprehension. "But the cold, it's different this year, deeper." Anya nodded. The air seemed denser, the cold penetrated layers of fur like never before. The entrance to the meat storage, dug into the permafrost, began to freeze, preventing access and threatening to seal off the food. A cruel paradox, abundant food, yet unreachable. Ancestral wisdom said that nature always offered a solution. Anya spent sleepless nights, poring over Ivan's teachings and Boris's stories. She remembered an ancient technique for creating barriers of ice and compacted snow, insulating and strengthening the cabin structures. For the meat storage, an audacious idea. A new, deeper entrance, protected by an ice labyrinth, using the cold itself as an insulating barrier, allowing controlled access. It would be a monumental task, requiring everyone's strength and coordination, testing the village's unity once again. The next morning, Anya called a meeting. The air in the main cabin was tense. Faces marked by fatigue and uncertainty filled the space. Anya, standing, felt a chill in her stomach, but her eyes showed unshakable determination. "Winter challenges us again," she began, her voice clear and firm. "It is not hunger that stalks us, but the cold itself threatening our homes and food. We will not yield." She explained her plan. Reinforce cabins with double walls of snow and ice, and build a new access to the meat storage, an intricate tunnel that would protect the village's treasure. Murmurs of doubt and astonishment began. The work would be immense and exhausting. Boris stood up. "She speaks the truth," the elder said, his voice resonant. "It is everyone's work for the good of all." Dmitri and Mikhail, without hesitation, spoke up, their faces illuminated by a new determination. "We will be with you, Anya," Dmitri said, and Mikhail nodded vigorously. Lyudmila, with an encouraging smile, joined the chorus. Gradually, fear gave way to understanding, doubt to hope. The villagers, one by one, agreed, seeing in Anya the leader who would guide them through this new storm. That moment of decision and mutual trust was the new climax, a testament to the unshakable strength born of unity and belief. Oymyakon, once again, prepared for the impossible, with the collective power of a people who refused to be broken. The morning after Anya's meeting brought a new, pulsating energy to Oymyakon. It wasn't the euphoria of the hunt, but a silent determination, forged in necessity and mutual trust. The villagers, with rustic tools and hearts full of renewed purpose, emerged from their cabins to face the challenge imposed by winter. Anya, her shoulder still sensitive, but her mind sharp, coordinated the work. She divided tasks with the precision of a strategist, remembering how Ivan organized the great hunts. The men, led by Dmitri and Mikhail, began to excavate snow and ice around the cabins, creating deep trenches that would be filled to form the double walls. The biting air turned breath into dense clouds, but no one stopped. The women, under Lyudmila's guidance, prepared mixtures of snow and water that, once compacted and frozen, would form sturdy ice blocks. Their hands, accustomed to sewing and cooking, now molded winter's raw material into protection with surprising dexterity. The children, even the smallest, helped by carrying small handfuls of snow, feeling like an essential part of the great work. It was a ballet of cooperation, where every movement had meaning, every effort contributed to everyone's survival. The construction of the new access to the meat storage was the most complex part. Anya, with Boris's help, drew the intricate labyrinth of tunnels on the frozen ground that would protect the food. Dmitri and Mikhail, with axes and shovels, opened the first hole, feeling the permafrost yield under their blows. Anya instructed them on the incline, width, and shape of the curves, ensuring that cold air would be trapped in the tunnel's turns, creating natural insulation. Days turned into a succession of arduous work. Hands ached, muscles protested, but the sight of each cabin gaining a new layer of protection, of each meter of tunnel advancing, rekindled the flame of hope. Boris, with his wisdom, reminded everyone of the stories of their ancestors who had built cities of ice and snow to survive. Lyudmila, with her gentle smile, brought warm teas and nutritious broths, nourishing not only the body but the spirit. Anya watched everyone, a lump in her throat. These people, her people, would not surrender. They were the embodiment of resilience. Finally, After weeks of tireless effort, the work was complete. The cabins were more robust. Their double walls of ice and compacted snow resisted the howling wind, and moisture had been contained. The new tunnel to the meat storage was a masterpiece of ancestral engineering, an icy labyrinth that kept the food safe and accessible. The entire village gathered to celebrate, not with the euphoria of before, but with deep gratitude and a sense of security they hadn't felt in a long time. Anya, exhausted but her heart overflowing, saw the sparkle in Boris and Lyudmila's eyes, the pride on the faces of Dmitri and Mikhail, who now looked at her with even greater reverence. The children ran and played, safe in their reinforced homes. Winter was still a powerful force, but Oymyakon had proven once again that unity and courage could overcome any adversity. The flame of hope, which she had rekindled with the hunt, now transformed into a constant fire, warming the village's soul and promising a future where resilience would be its greatest fortress. The community, stronger and more united than ever, had resolved the main conflict, emerging victorious against the fury of winter. That winter, which seemed endless, began to show signs of retreat. The days, once short and grey, slowly lengthened, and a softer, though still cold, light filtered through the cabin windows. The completion of the tunnel and the reinforcement of the dwellings brought not only physical security, but a deep peace that settled in the villagers' hearts. The celebration of that achievement was not with shouts and dances, but with a reverent silence, glances that met, and discreet smiles laden with mutual understanding. Anya, sitting by the fire in Boris and Lyudmila's cabin, felt the warmth not only in her hands, but in her soul. Her shoulder was completely healed, and the pain in her heart, once an open wound, was now a scar that told a story of love and overcoming. She watched Boris, who with wrinkled hands polished a bone tool, and Lyudmila, who wove a blanket from the buffalo hides. With each stitch, they also wove the future of the village. "You brought more than meat to us, Anya," Lyudmila said, without taking her eyes off her work, but with a voice filled with tenderness. "You brought back our faith." Boris nodded, his gaze meeting Anya's. "Ivan would be proud, my daughter. You honored his name and that of all our ancestors." Anya smiled, a smile that reached her eyes. She was no longer just Ivan's widow. She was Anya, the huntress, the leader, the guardian of Oymyakon's hope. Her journey had transformed not only the village but herself. The overwhelming loneliness that consumed her after Ivan's death had been replaced by a deep connection with her people, an unbreakable bond forged in adversity. Dmitri and Mikhail were now constant shadows at her door. They came not only to learn hunting techniques, but to hear her stories, to absorb the wisdom she had gained. Anya taught them about respect for nature, about the importance of patience and observation, about how every life in the tundra was interconnected. She watched them grow in strength, wisdom, and empathy, and knew that the village's future was in good hands. The children, with their rosy cheeks and bright eyes, ran through the reinforced cabins, their laughter echoing like bells in the snow. They would not remember hunger, but they would remember Anya's story, of the woman who defied winter and brought salvation. Their games were a living testament to Oymyakon's resilience, a hymn to life that had triumphed over darkness. The village, once on the brink of collapse, flourished. It was not a flourishing of warmth and colors, but a flourishing of spirit, of unity and of purpose. The fires burned brighter, conversations were more animated, and the sense of community was palpable in every gesture of help, in every look of understanding. Oymyakon had found its true strength, not in overcoming a single obstacle, but in the ability to adapt, to unite, and to refuse to give up, no matter how cruel the winter. Anya knew new challenges would come. Yakutia was a land of constant tests, but now the village was prepared. They had food, shelter, and most importantly, they had each other. The flame of hope she had ignited with her act of courage had spread, becoming a blaze that warmed everyone. Ivan's legacy lived in her, and her own legacy. That of a woman who, moved by love and relentless determination, had saved her people, was forever etched in the icy heart of Oymyakon. Life continued, a vibrant testament to the unbreakable soul that refused to be broken, promising a future where resilience would be its greatest and most enduring fortress. Life continued, a vibrant testament to the unbreakable soul that refused to be broken, promising a future where resilience would be its greatest and most enduring fortress. With the arrival of spring, a subtle miracle began to unfold on the tundra. The ice, once an unforgiving embrace, now yielded in murmuring streams, revealing the dark, damp earth beneath. Small, vibrant purple snow crocuses dared to pierce the last layer of snow, a sign that life always finds a way. Even after the harshest winter, Oymyakon, which had faced the darkness with courage, now bathed in the soft light of longer days. Anya, sitting on the threshold of her reinforced cabin, observed the village with a serene heart. Her shoulder, completely healed, no longer ached, and the scar on her soul, once an open wound from Ivan's loss, had transformed into a gentle reminder of a love that had propelled her. She watched Dmitri and Mikhail, now taller and more confident, leading the young men on small reindeer hunts, applying the lessons of tracking and patience she had taught them. Their movements were precise, their eyes attentive, and Anya felt a maternal pride for these young men who would carry on their people's legacy. Boris and Lyudmila, sitting side by side, watched the river beginning to thaw, their wrinkled hands intertwined. Peace had returned to their faces, a deep peace that winter had tried to steal. Lyudmila, with a smile, pointed to a group of children playing near the bank, their laughter echoing in the fresh breeze. "They won't remember hunger, Anya," she said, her voice soft as the whisper of the wind. "They will remember the hope you gave them." Boris nodded, his eyes welling with gratitude as he met Anya's gaze. "You have woven a new future for us, my daughter, a future where unity is our greatest wealth." Anya felt the truth in their words. The human connection forged in adversity had deepened, becoming Oymyakon's foundation. The women gathered to dry herbs and prepare food for the summer, their voices mingling in ancient songs. The men repaired sleds and tools, preparing for the coming seasons, not with the anxiety of before, but with the confidence of those who know they can overcome any challenge. The cabins, once fragile, now seemed like silent guardians, witnesses to the resilience of a people. Anya stood up, feeling the gentle breeze on her face. She was no longer just Ivan's widow. She was the soul of Oymyakon, the flame that warmed everyone's hearts. Her love for Ivan, for her people, had transformed into an unshakable force, a beacon of hope that would guide the village through all the winters yet to come. Ivan's legacy lived in her, and her own legacy, that of a woman who, moved by pure love and relentless determination, had saved her people, was forever etched in the icy heart of Yakutia, an eternal testament to the strength of the human spirit. Oymyakon now not only survived, it flourished, an oasis of hope in a world of ice.